slow in here, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Do you live in the land where you're like on hold music?
Your what?
Is that on hold?
Our phones are not that fancy, I think just.
You can have
Okay, actually.
Okay, so we're now up on the work session, and I think it's Wes and Mr. Moody are taking this, and so you folks have the ball.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, thanks for being here tonight. I promise to keep this short in light of the late hour. We were able to hand out an information sheet that provides you some background and some information about the levy that we'll be bringing to you at the next council meeting for your consideration. What's the matter?
Hold on.
Did we get one?
Oh, yeah. Everybody did but you apparently, I'm sorry.
I'm in trouble now, because if the city recorder is mad at you, I'm in deep doo-doo.
So,
Thank you.
I know you haven't had a chance to read it. I encourage you to take a look at it, between now and the next, and the council meeting. But what I'd like to do is just highlight some of those things for you, where we think the important aspects of it are. So, some of this will be a little bit of old news, but a bit of a refresher. So the general fund is home to the library, museum, and parks departments, all of which are 100% funded with general revenues, property taxes, franchise fees, state shared revenues make up the bulk of those general revenues. There is some income to the library from the regional group that provides funding to the library. Operating costs, as you know, continue to grow at a faster rate than do property taxes and other general revenues. That said, if nothing changes, we're looking at a projected deficit in fiscal year 26-27 in the general fund. Third, a local option levy that of the type that we're talking about with you gives the public a chance to vote on whether or not they wish to support the library, museum, and parks. There's two options for that levy that we're going to be bringing to you at the council meeting. The first option funds all three of those departments for 5 years. The second option would fund the library and the parks only for the 5 years of the levy. Option one will fund, like I said, will fund all three for 5 years at a rate of $1.82 a thousand, and that's $1.82 per $1,000 assessed value. And option two will fund library and parks for 5 years with a rate of $1.49 per $1,000 of assessed value. With option two, we would be administratively looking at scaling back, or potentially closing the museum and all that goes with that. It's important to note that we will have to continue to pay the loan payments on the museum building. Those payments are currently made from the general fund, and I have here someplace how much that is. It's about $400,000. The loan has a current outstanding balance of about $413,000, and the debt service payments are just under $74,000 a year through the 28-29 fiscal year. And that's actually on the next last page of that handout. So the rates, how did we determine those rates? We projected the costs of operations for each of the 5 years and then estimated the growth in taxable assessed value, again, for those same years. And then it's kind of just math. You divide one by the other and calculate the rate per $1,000 of assessed value. There's a table there provided in the document that shows how the calculated rate, shows how we calculated that rate on the last page. It's important to note, the rate calculation towards the bottom of that table. For 25-26, you'll see the calculated rates there are $1.82 and $1.49. The rates shown for those other years are the rates that are derived just to cover the bare minimum costs of operations as they were projected. The option 1 and option 2 revenues that are shown on the bottom 2 lines of that table, those are all calculated using the 25-26 rates, okay? Because assessed value goes up a little bit every year, that causes those revenue numbers to increase a little bit every year. So, kind of just in summary, what I would offer is that going forward, current resources to the general fund simply won't support the full palette of services that are currently offered. Either an additional revenue stream has to be identified or services have to be reduced in order to balance the general fund going forward. And then, as we discussed during the budget process for 24-25, staff believes that a local option levy, is the best option for the city. With that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions or turn it over to the council for your discussion, if you want to talk about that.
I'll answer any questions. I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please do.
Why the second option? Why take the museum off the table?
And that's the question that we were anticipating, I guess.
So, you know, as I talk to council and community and business leaders and the folks that I talk to on a daily basis, one of the things that came up, of course, was the levy. And one of the things that came up was the worry that if the 3 were put together, all 3 would fail. And the continual request that we pull losing that. So knowing that the community members, council members were worried about that, it seemed appropriate to provide policy makers the opportunity to decide, do we take the full palette free, or do we take the reduced palette to the levy and let our community decide? I can tell you, you know, there's different strategies. And we can discuss that when we go to council as well, so the community as a whole can hear, but there are options. Do you put all 3 on and put it in November, and then if it doesn't pass, then we drop the museum? Or do we try again with all 3 in May? But then we're bumping a lot closer to that date where we need to figure out what we're doing and what it looks like. A suggestion was to separate them all 3, put them on the ballot. Strategically, what that often results in is a no vote for all 3. You know, we have to look at what do we go out with in November and then what do we go out with in May? Because if we go in November and we go with the 2 and it passes, do we go back in May for the 1? And strategically, the answer is probably no, because then the community will be like, oh, just pass this rock and pass that. So taking in all of the information from all of the people, it made the most sense to give you the 2 options that we proposed.
Since I can't use my calculator, can you tell me a $300,000 assessed value home, what those numbers would be of the 2 different dollars of the $18?
Well, I can tell you for $189,000 assessed home, because mine's worth double that, but that's what my assessment is. It's $343.98 a year for all 3. It is, which translates to $28.67 a month. Or yes, for 2 of them versus 3, it's a reduction for me of $5.30 a month. I'd rather pay the extra $5.30 and have all 3 agencies still in operation. But I'd also, if we were to go out for all 3 rather than just 2, or another combination of 2, I would also like to know what our options are for grant writing, for outside sources of funding, for a beneficial investor that might want to do something like buy the museum building and lease it back to the city on a long-term lease. If there is other income that's available to be made out of parks. And I'd also want to be very careful with the timing of the November/May, understanding that there also may be a bond coming out from the school system to support upgrades to the schools. Because if there are too many things on the ballot at one time, that's pretty much
Based on
guaranteed
what
that,
Susan and Emily just told us, they're not gonna have a bond ready for November.
not for November, but if we try to do a November/May, then maybe May may be a different issue.
Counselor Joe, the answer to your question would be $546.
Thank you.
For the $300,000 assessed value.
Mayor, if I might.
Please.
Councillor Morton, I have a few answers, mainly on outside sources of funding, and grants. So grants are never easy, but I'm gonna say they're easier for capital improvement. There are almost no grants for operating. That's where we're running into trouble, is the operating side.
Right.
If we wanted to build a museum, we'd be in better shape than trying to operate. So, we have a great grant writer, and we've been very, very successful in getting grants, mainly for capital improvement. So, we've looked at other sources of revenue, there's just never enough, is the problem. There's never enough, and it's a one-off, right?
And I
Can't
asked those
sustain it.
questions already knowing what most of those
Yes.
answers were, but I just wanted to get them out in public.
Yeah, and they're not sustainable, and we need them sustainable. So, we might be able to get a one-off. Maybe there's an angel out there that, would love to donate and support the museum. And if there are, come, maybe talk to me.
We could definitely take that money.
Absolutely, we'll figure that out. But again, that's a hard one, right? So we did look at as many things as we could. This has not been a quick or easy decision to bring this to you. We started these conversations when I first came to the city 2 years ago, right? And at that time, we started the warning of there's some issues, we're gonna have to address them, there's some issues. And my first budget, we had to lay people off. And we've continued that process, but we're at a point where we need sustainable funding is what's necessary. Did I answer all?
Yes, you did.
Council Morton is, I don't know if you're still on the Community Foundation Board, but is that something we could talk to the Community Foundation about?
That is certainly a possibility. The Independence Library has a substantial fund on that. That would be up to the library board to make that decision.
So I have a question, and Kenna, so if things do not pass,
Yes.
talk about how that rolls out from there.
So if you decide not to put the levy on the ballot, or if the levy does not pass, we are funded through the end of this fiscal year, which is June 2025. Then we have to take a really hard look at where do we cut, what services do we cut, what's most important to the community, and it could run the gamut here. It could run the gamut from reducing services across all three, really reducing services to a couple of days, right? Is the museum closed and open one day? Are we running it with all volunteers? Is the library open a couple of days? Or do we close the library? Do we close the parks? Do we close the museum? Can we limp along with the library but close the other two? So this is an analysis that we'll have to go through if this doesn't pass. We've talked about options, But again, those would be policy decisions that we'll be bringing to you with that analysis laid out so that you can decide, do we close the library, do we close the museum, do we close the parks, do we cut service hours in one, close the others?
Could you articulate a little bit more, a little bit further on, I think I understand that, if you were closing the museum, we're only having a little bit of a day or two, you got that. Talk to me more about, limitations with parks and limitations with libraries. Could you put that into, a little bit more?
Well, I think Gerald said it best, our parks would go feral, right? So a number, our hope is that we would leave, the communities park, the main park open, and we would be able to maintain it. That is our hope. But the rest of the parks will most likely, close off. There would be no porta potties. Could we keep our parks person? We don't know the answer to that. We probably would not have our outsourced parks. We do outsource part of our parks. That was less expensive than having multiple park people, so we would reduce that contractor out. So
Gerald also said we would remove the equipment because of liability issues.
right, there's the potential to remove equipment, exactly. Those, and worst case scenario, Mayor, we would have to close the main park. Not that we would want to, but, that is the worst case scenario, so that's the parks. Reduce everything down using the least used parks, closing first, right? And then, narrow it down. The library, we would look at the same things that we did when we reduced services my first year here. What days do the people use the library the most? And we would try and keep open as much as we could those days they used it the most. Is it a Friday, is it a Thursday, what day is it? What days are they, I apologize. And that would be based on a balance of the costs to have people there and the services, all of that is in it.
So that would be it'd be trying to manage the library with fewer staff people, which would,
Oh, I see, there will be a reduction in staff, there is no question. We would have to reduce staff in the museum, we would have to reduce staff. And so those cuts that we did that first year, they would do.
Well, then Kenna, doesn't it go hand in hand that if we're reducing the hours that they're open, reducing staff's hours, then we're looking at retention issues?
100%. And here's the problem, we have incredible staff.
Believe it.
Once you lose that incredible staff, trying to bring them back. So one of the suggestions was that we close it down for a couple of years and then restart. Well, we really can't do that because once you close it down, we lose Patrick, we lose Natasha, we lose Miss Joe, right? We lose these people that are good at what they do. And then finding someone who wants to come to a city that had to shut down these services, I wouldn't
Kind of my point.
I wouldn't want them there.
It'd be like a limited duration kind of position, and that's really what's that. I know we're not making decisions here, we'll make a decision at a council meeting, but I think we need to paint a picture for the community, precisely based on what you said about this is what it means for the park, this is what it means for the museum, this is what it means for the library. And instead of just banking on their emotions, they need to understand the whole picture, the way that we do, the way that we're gonna make our decisions based on that, so they certainly need to understand that. So whether that's a manual putting together some kind of presentation to put on the website, I don't know what flavor that takes, but I think we owe that to the community, that they understand precisely what yes and no means. Because oftentimes, I don't know who writes, I guess Carol, would we write the language for the levy? We would write the language that explains what it is, correct?
We've
Okay.
already
But
addressed that.
sometimes that's written really poorly and nobody understands what yes means or no means. So it has to be very explicit.
We've been working with the city attorney on that.
And I do wanna note that, as city employees, our involvement can be relatively limited. And, we're working also with the city attorney on what is we can and we'll follow that very closely, because again, I had mentioned that things have been weaponized, and we want to make sure that no one can weaponize against us if we make some minor mistake. So we're going to make sure that everything is done carefully, which means Emmanuel may not be able to do it. We can give facts.
Somebody,
Right.
somebody, yeah.
Could you go,
And city resources too, maybe we can't use a website, maybe we'd have to set up another website, so yeah.
Could you
we'll
talk
work
about the
on that.
timeline that we're looking at here, because I know it's pretty close.
Yes, as far as the levy?
Yes, please.
Yes. So the levy, the option for you to put the levy on the ballot will come to you August 13th. I believe, Karen, it is August 16th that we have to have it to Karen.
The next day.
Oh, the next day, okay. The 14th, we have to have it to Karen. So,
and the next step, sorry, the
Yes,
next
please.
step is to refer it to the county elections officer so that it can appear on that November.
Okay, so
ballot,
council on the 13th, Karen on the 14th, and then to
and then to
the
the county.
lecture's office, okay.
yes,
The drop dead date is the 14th. We have to have, am I correct in that? We have to have taken definitive action by the 14th so that it can make the ballot.
Yes.
Okay. So that means it's gonna have to make a decision that
Right.
13th.
Because there are also publication deadlines that we have to.
I understand. That's why I wanted to make sure that we talked about the timing of all of this.
So I guess we're all supposed to give feedback on what we think, right? Because then we're gonna bring it. So I'll give my feedback and everybody give their feedback. I don't really want a levy, but I think that people should vote. And I do not think taking the museum out is a good idea. I think all three of them are important. And all three of them, if we're gonna do a levy and put it to the voters, I think all three of them should be in it.
I would agree with that.
That's what.
I agree with that, but I think it's more appropriate to talk about that on council. But get us some time to crunch through this and think it through. That's essentially the direction I would go in as well.
so we'll continue to bring you the two options. We will have option 1 and option 2, and you can have a full discussion at
At
council,
the next council meeting where we vote.
correct?
And where would it be an appropriate forum for us to discuss about how we're gonna move forward with some sort of element outside of city staff to get this thing up and running?
Not in the council. In people's private communications, not related to their official. And people could do that at that time.
Thank you.
And I will say this, although we will be very cautious with it, staff can provide facts.
Mhm.
They can provide facts.
Do we have, I know we haven't done any sort of public opinion poll on this, and it's probably the timing of us getting feedback from people about separating them out versus putting them all together. Is there any possibility to do that, or?
We talked about it, but the timing is so tight, Counselor, as you noted.
Yeah.
It's incredibly tight, and there wasn't enough time. And doing polling is expensive.
Yeah.
And again, so there's two things to balance. I wish that we were wealthy and we didn't have to do so.
Well, if we were wealthy, we wouldn't have a
Exactly.
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 problem solved.
Are there additional questions for our staff people tonight? I know I'm gonna go home and read this carefully, and
It's very well written, but, if you have questions, please feel free to let us know.
Could you autograph my copy?
I'd be happy to. Sorry, Kenna asked me not to make her laugh because it hurts, but
Oh.
I'm just shocked at your low level of confidence.
yeah.
Okay, if there's nothing else for people to, that you wanna do, we are adjourned.